Today's daf is daf Samach Dalit. And yesterday we began on Samach Gimel Amid Beis, the sixth perek, which is called Perek Rabbi Shmuel. And we were focused, which will continue today, on a machlokes with regard to the overlap of the Omer and Shabbos. And what we pointed out was that in this machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and Chachamim, as to whether or not we should prepare 5 se'im, that's the Chachamim, or only 3 se'im, which is Rabbi Shmuel, the issue is when you have a situation where you could technically, according to Torah law, you could override Shabbos, even if it means harvesting 5 se'im of barley for the Omer. But nevertheless, Rabbi Shmuel would rather reduce it down to shalosh se'im, because that would be sufficient to create fine flour on the basic level. Although you could upgrade the quality of the flour if you were to harvest and prepare 5 se'im, which is exactly what Rabbi Shmuel is going to require during the week. The Chachamim are not impressed by this because they maintain that even during the week on a day of Chol, when the 16th of Nisan falls on a weekday, you could still get away with 3 se'im. Now, the Gemara here on the top of Samach Dalid, which we began yesterday, made an attempt to match up this machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel and the Chachamim with another machlokes between Rabbi Shmuel beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and the Chachamim, and that was Rabba's intent, or attempt, in which we're talking now about not the 16th of Nisan on Shabbos, but rather the 14th of Nisan on Shabbos, which is the day of Shchitas Korban Pesach. And Rabbi Shmuel was very inhibited about flaying the entire lamb on Shabbos on the 14th, because it would be sufficient if you flayed it up to the breast. You don't have to flay the rest of the lamb. And since it's Shabbos, let's minimize the amount of Chil Shabbos. So Rabbi wants to connect that with Rabbi Shmuel and our Mishnah in the case of harvesting barley for the Omer to minimize the violation of the Shabbos and do the barest minimum, which would suffice with 3 se'im. The Chacham, on the other hand, advocate that you have to flay the entire lamb, even though you're violating the Shabbos and it's not absolutely necessary. And the Gemara thinks that this is really a repeat of the machlokes in our Mishnah between Rabbi Shmuel and the Chachamim. However, the Gemara rejects this analogy on 2 counts, meaning in both directions. First of all, it's very possible, says the Gemara, that Rabbi Shmuel, in our Mishnah, who limits the amount of se'in at 3 se'in on Shabbos for the sake of the Omer, would accept the Chachamim shita that with regard to flaying the lamb on the 14th of Shabbos, that you should flay the entire lamb against Rabbi Shmuel ben Oshel and Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka because of bizayon kodshim. Whereas in the case of the Omer, there's no issue of bizayon kodshim. On the other hand, the Gemara says that it's very possible that Rabbi Shmuel ben Oshel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka would agree with the Chachamim Shita that both during the week and Shabbos, all you have to do is harvest 3 se'in, and that's enough for tzarech gavoah. But in the case of flaying the Korban Pesach, there it might be considered a bizayon to kodshim, and therefore tzarech gavoah if he doesn't flay the entire animal. Okay, so now we're going to start today's daf with Ella Omar Rabbah. And this is, if you count down from the top of Samach Daled, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the top. So now Rabbah comes back into the ballpark, and he's going to try another attempt at linking up our machlokas as recorded in our Mishnah between Rabbi Shmuel and the Chacham with a different machlokas Tanoim, and that's Rabbi Shmuel v'Rab Chanina Skan Kohanim Omer Dovrech V'Snan. We have a Mishnah that says Rabbi Chanina Skan Kohanim Omer B'Shabbos Niktzar B'Yochid B'Magal Echad U'B'Kupa Achas. Okay, I'm just going to open the window in case we get a siren here. So again, I just want to reiterate, if there's a siren, again, I have trouble there, but I think I'm getting better at it. So hang in there with me. Okay, next. What is the point of Rabbi Chanina Skan Kohanim? He says the following. When we're talking about the Omer, if we're doing the harvesting of the barley for the Omer on a weekday, then we would try to get as many people as possible involved, and that's called b'shlosha, b'shalosh kupos, and b'shalosh magolos. But if we're violating the Shabbos, then Reb Chanina Skan Kohanim says, hey, wait a minute, there's no need to get 3 people involved, each one of them violating the Shabbos, when we could get away with 1 person. And that's called b'yochid, b'magal echad, and b'kupa achas. Chachamim say, no, echad Shabbos, echad chol, b'shalosh kopos, u'b'shalosh magolos. There's no need. Once you're overriding the Shabbos, and the Torah gave you the green light to override the Shabbos for the sake of the Omer, then do it exactly as you would do it during the week and get everybody involved. 3 people instead of 1. So the Gemara says, Mi lo ka'amar Rabbi Chanina Skan Kohanim asam came the efshel lo tarchinon. Since we could get away with 1 person harvesting the barley, then why use 3? Let's minimize the violation of Shabbos. And Hochinami came into Efshar. Therefore, here too, with regard to the Omer and how many se'in we need of barley in order to generate the refined flour, then let's do it with 3. So Gemara says, no, mimai. There's no justification or proof that this is correct. Dilmad kan lo kol Rabbi Shmuel hacha. Where does Rabbi Shmuel want to limit the amount of violation, and therefore he wants to reap only 3 so'in el deleka persume milsa, because the number of se'in will not affect the public statement, and we'll explain why publicity is so important in just a second. Aval hasam, there in the case of how many people should go out and harvest the barley, Ika Persume Nisa, Emirab Kirabonan Svile. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel would accept the Rabbanan Shita that we want Pirsum HaMilsa, and we want to get three people involved. Now, the Pirsum HaMilsa here, in generating publicity, has to do with what's called a Baitusim, and the Baitusim rejected the Prushim, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, all based on their misinterpretation of a statement of Antignos Ich Socho in Masechet Avos that they Ki'ilu understood him saying that there's no schar in the world to come, so they rejected it anyway. So they had a particular machlokus about the Omer. They understood Mimachos HaShabbos means on a Sunday, whereas Chazal al Pi Torah Sheba'al Peh understood that it meant the day after Yontif, which means not Tesvav B'Nisan but Tesayin B'Nisan. And we want to publicize that we're doing it according to the Prushim against the Tzdukim, against the Baitusim, and therefore we need person bills. And furthermore, Inami, I could go the other way around. Ad kan lo kom Reb Chanina Skan Kohanim. There, Reb Chanina Skan Kohanim wants to reduce it to one person who's doing the harvesting. Okay, I'm gonna take another 2 minutes and go back to my study because this is very, very difficult for me. I'm on a bed. So again, I'll need 2 minutes if you could bear with me.